Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. The Emily Dickinson Forgery was briefly touched on in the Netflix documentary, but we're going to go more into that with Brent Ashworth. We'll find out that he played a major role in identifying that as a forgery. Check out our conversation. But before you do that, it's time to announce a winner. And I have a bunch more names. You can see this bowl's almost full here. And we're going to see who is the winner of the lost manuscript. William McClellan, there it is, right here. Who's going to win this book here? So we'll find out right now. I'll close my eyes and I'm going to pick one. How about this one here? And let's see here. What does it say? Doesn't want to open. James Williams in Salt Lake City, Utah. So James, I'm going to see if I can drop that by, since you're sort of local and I make a lot of trips to Salt Lake. So anyway, congratulations, James. This book is yours, Lost Manuscript with William McClellan. And so we'll talk about another supposedly lost manuscript with the Emily Dickinson Forgery. So anyway, back to our conversation.
But at any rate, 10 years later, Hoffman's in prison for 10 years. This is 1997. And I'm maybe I told you this, I don't know, but I'm the president of the Emily Dickinson Society of Utah.
Right.
Okay. And this catalog comes out. There are actually two of them, but this catalog comes out from Sotheby's. Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And I got Sotheby's catalog. I had their head guy on with me the other day, Selby Kiefer. I was over the book department. He's a long friend of mine for 40, 50 years. And we talked just over the weekend about an item the other day. And so at any rate, I'm looking at this catalog, and all of a sudden I see this Emily Dickinson poem in here. I don't know if that picks up, but
yeah.
Okay. I'm seeing this Emily Dickinson poem in here, and I'm thinking right off, wow, somebody found something of my favorite poet, okay? I haven't seen anything on a catalog in my lifetime other than one piece that I picked up many years ago off of a Swan Gallery sale. And then there was another one that I picked up too off a catalog in California years ago. But this one, this is the first one I've ever seen on a Sotheby's sale, big auction. And it's an autographed poetical manuscript. I'm looking at it. Man, it's her writing. It looks good. And then I started reading it. That God cannot be understood, everyone agrees. We do not know his motives or comprehend his deeds. At any rate, it goes on to basically say, since we can't understand God and he doesn't care about us, why should we care about him? And when Hoffman first offered me this in 1984 for $10,000, I knew instantly what it was when I read this in the catalog. So I thought, that's Hoffman, It's in pencil, right? So
oh, really?
Yeah, because half of Emily's stuff's in pencil. That's why it's so light.
Oh, okay.
And those would never have been charged.
So Emily
anyway.
did really write in pencil a lot.
She really wrote in pencil about half the time.
Which makes being a forger all the more easy.
Oh, yeah. And plus, she's our rarest and probably best, other than maybe Walt Whitman, poet in America. The Shakespeare Library, the Folger Library in Washington, D.C., right behind the Supreme Court building, has the largest collection of Shakespeare in the world, including in London. It's the biggest one, because Folger was a big collector, huge, one of these robber barons from the 1800s that bought every Shakespeare, book that came up, first folio and whatever. And they put on their only woman show they'd ever had a few years ago for Emily Dickinson. That's the kind of respect they have for Emily Dickinson. But Emily Dickinson, as you know, wasn't famous in her lifetime. It was after her death that her sister was going through her drawers and found these poems sewed together in what they call facils. And they found 1,776 of them. It's an easy number to remember.
Uh-huh.
And they were published. But there was a family fight ensued, and it took about another 70 years to get them all published.
70 years?
70 years, because half the family took half of her poems, and the other half that didn't like each other, like her brother and brother-in-law and whatever, sister, took the others. That's why half of her collection's at the Jones Library in Amherst, and the other half's at Harvard. because
Oh.
these collections were donated different ways. Harvard has her one remaining white dress that we know that she wore. When we were on our mission, we went again. I went again, took my wife there to, she'd been there before, to the Emily Dickinson home, where they have the room where she basically lived her life in this one room, in her little writing desk against the window and so on. And any rate, fascinating lady, but marvelous poetry. And this poem, I didn't like it when Hoffman first offered it to me, even though it looks like her writing. Not only that, but it's on stationery that her father, who was a congressman, would have used, because she only made one trip out of Amherst, besides visiting Mount Holyoke College for Girls, where she went just a few miles away, and that was to see her dad at Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't go very far from home except for that one trip. So, at any rate, so this had a blind stamp on it, this piece of paper of the U.S. Capitol building. That's a stamp that has no ink. It's an impression on the page. We use different terms for it. We in the collective business call it a blind stamp. But at any rate, it helps to authenticate the paper as having been from some her dad probably had as a congressman. Okay. Hoffman did a lot of things like that, which a lot of forgers never bothered with. So, any rate, I've got a Mark Twain book, Tom Sawyer, that I got, which has a full handwritten page about the Reverend Twitchell, his good friend that lived down the alleyway, and it has Twitchell's book plate in the book and an inscription from Mark Twain. Apparently, it was all done by Hoffman. The book is a genuine $30,000 book that he put his forged signature and forged book plate. The one mistake he made is that he misspelled Twitchell's name in the book plate.
Oh, you're kidding.
Which Twain would never do, because the guy lives just a block away from him, one of his best friends,
Wow.
So they didn't find that out till years later, but I've got that book now put away. I bought it. So, the point is that Hoffman used little things like that because he knew, like for instance on the Book of Mormon manuscript of Grandin that Hoffman created. I remembered when it was shown to me with the Salamander letter by Glenn Rowe, when he was the archivist for the LDS Church back 35 years ago. And I remember thinking that I saw a blind stamp on it of E.B. Grandin, as I lifted it up to the light in the room. So when I was called by Marlon Jensen again to go on a mission for the church, I said, maybe the first thing we should do is get rid of Mark's stuff, because I found out that 25 years later, some historians are starting to use his things again.
Right.
Yeah, and so that concerned me a lot. And so we couldn't find the Salamander letter or the Book of Mormon contract till Dean Jesse remembered that possibly President Hinckley had it over at the First Presidency of Bald. And so that's how we found it. And I think I told you the story, didn't I, about how they brought that over. And we're in the new church history library now. And they have this little gal that comes over, kind of like the guy that carries the football for the president, with this briefcase. Like, she's not letting this out of her sight, because it comes from the First Presidency Vault. And we're all sitting around. I'm a missionary now at this time at the New Church History Library. Second time I've been there. I was at the old archives before that. And I said, well, let's get into a room where we can see by natural light this blind stamp that I remember, okay, on the Salamander letter. And about 5 of us, including this gal, she wasn't letting me out of her sight, was there, missionary, watching me, very carefully as I was looking at this, twisting it everywhere I can with the sun hitting the window in the, on the west side of the Church History Library. And I couldn't see a thing. And I'm sitting here thinking, boy, is my memory that bad? I remember there was a blind stamp on this. Anyway, I looked at both documents. I couldn't find it. And then finally I said, well, let's get out of this natural light. Let's lock all the doors and turn the lights on inside a room. Because I was in a room when I saw it with Glenn years ago, although he had light coming through his windows. And so we did. We went to the room next door, shut the doors, and suddenly I could see it. And it wasn't on the Salamander. It was on the Grandin contract.
Oh.
But it exactly was what I remember, except it was more. It was actually a full paragraph. Had E.B. Grant's name, and then it went on, like it was taken from some press thing or something that was left over from the press. The Book of Mormon was published on. Well, Hoffman went to that great extent to put these authenticating things like that on his masterpieces, but it turned out that I remembered it, but it was with the Salamander letter, but it was on the Grandin contract.
Okay.
Yeah, rather than the Salamander letter. So that answered that anyway.
Let's jump back to Emily Dickinson for a second.
You bet.
So basically, what you're telling me is Mark offered that back to you in 1984, I believe it was.
He offered it to me in '84. He knew that was my favorite poet. Okay, that was manufactured for me, I'm just sure.
Okay.
Yeah, nobody else knew about it, so it ends up 13 years
but
later.
You read it and said,
I told Mark it's horrible. This, I said, it looks like her writing to me. I didn't question the fact that she'd written it, but I don't want it, I'm not going to spend $10,000 for a poem that I think's the worst one she ever wrote. I didn't know Hoffman had written it. Now it makes perfect sense because it's Hoffman's ideology,
Okay.
God doesn't care about us, so we don't care about him. That's which is not the way Latter-day Saint people that love Emily Dickinson know about her writings.
Right.
Okay.
So essentially, he sold it to somebody else. It floated around the U.S. and then ends up in the Sotheby's category.
Well, what happened was that Shannon Flynn had taken it down to Todd Axelrod for Mark, and Todd Axelrod was this dealer down in Nevada. Had these big autograph. There used to be autograph stores in about 6 big malls around the country. There was one that I visited years ago in the Galleria Mall in Dallas, Texas. There was one back in, as I recall, in Florida. There was one in Philadelphia. There were 6 big malls around the country. But Todd began in Las Vegas at the Showplace Mall right on the Strip. And that's where his first store was. And that's where Shannon Flynn took that and a few other things to him, before the Hoffman bombings and all that. And it's an interesting. So you might ask Shannon about it sometime, but he carried that stuff down there.
So Shannon sold it to Axelrod in Nevada.
Sold it to Axelrod, and the police were aware of that, and they tried to get Axelrod to help with the case. But they got enough documents from me and a few other people that they didn't need them, and Axelrod wasn't really forthcoming in sending him the documents, and they didn't know all of what he had. So I guess years later, he starts to try to get his money out of them by sending him to Sotheby's to sell. And the month before
Do you have any idea if Axelrod suspected it was a forgery?
I don't know. I wouldn't want to accuse him of anything because I don't know that at all. I assume he thought they were genuine.
Okay.
But I just don't know. Although there was one guy.
But he did know that this came from Hoffman.
Well, later he did, and so he might have known by this time.
Okay.
That they were certainly suspect. I don't know.
Because if you were offered this in '84 or whatever, so Axelrod gets it. He's had to have. I'm sure he was aware Hoffman went to jail.
Well, I'm sure he
right?
was aware of Hoffman, and there's actually a book written on this.
The Poet and the Murderer.
Called The Poet and the Murderer, and the author for that book, did a lot of research on it, and found that it was sent back to Axelrod in Las Vegas after. What happened was they went ahead with the sale. What I did was I called up Selby Kiefer at my friend at Sotheby's, and I said, I can't say.
This is in
97.
97.
I says, I can't say that document's a fake, but I sure wouldn't touch it because it was offered to me in '84 by Mark Hoffman. I don't know of a previous owner or history of it, okay? It is in pencil. There's no test for pencil, but I would stay away from it. And immediately I was told by Sotheby's that they had vetted it already, that it had gone to Ken Rendell, who was one of the greatest authenticators among the dealers, and he's not really an authenticator like Throckmorton, but he's among the dealers they consider Ken's one of the best. He's a good friend of mine, and so I called Ken up and I just said, hey, Ken, they said you authenticated this thing. He says, oh, no. He said, I just said, looking at it, it looks real. I said, well, it looks real to me too. But, that doesn't mean it's real. And I told him the story about it, how Hoffman had offered it to me, because I remembered it when I read it finally. And I never questioned the handwriting back then, but now I did, because, Hoffman. So, gone to prison and all that. And so Rendell said, no, I didn't do what they said. So I mentioned that to Selby. I says, well, I would pull that from your sale, because I think it's a Hoffman original. And I was head of the Emily Dickinson Society from Utah, and we'd all contributed money to go after anything of Emily's that might come up, okay, at the auction. Well, it was right after that he put me in contact with the greatest living authority of Emily Dickinson, Ralph Franklin. Ralph Franklin is at the Beinecke Library in Yale, at Yale University. Franklin's going to put this in his three-volume set of Emily Dickinson. All of her poems are finally out there. He's going to do the definitive set. And I'm saying to him, Dr. Franklin, I don't think you want to put this in your, because I'm pretty sure this is a Hoffman original. And he was a little shocked at me, and he says, well, how can that be? He says, it's on that stationery of the Congress of the United States. I said, well, Hoffman did that kind of stuff. But I told him my story, and I said, I can't say for sure it's a fake, but I can say for sure I wouldn't want to buy it. I wouldn't want to put it up for sale, And so he looked into it, and he finally came around and agreed with me. In fact, when the three-volume set came out, he gave me a compliment in the book for saving him
Oh, really?
from including her poem. Yeah, it's right in the front of the book, of the first volume. So he gave me a little credit with that. And Maine Antiques Digest, which is still one of the great publications of antique collecting around the country, actually published a 30-year retrospective book. I should have brought it here, but there's a whole chapter on this in there. And they retell the story. And of course, they said that Selby denied that I warned him, but I did warn him, at Sotheby's. And they went ahead with the sale. And it sold for $26,000 at the sale back in '97. And I found out that it was bought by the Jones Library, which has the second big collection there in Amherst, her hometown. And I got hold of Daniel Lombardo, who was the head of the little short guy, really fun guy, but he's quite short, brilliant, and very impressive. But I got a hold of him. I told him the story, and there was this long pause. I said, well, I've warned Dr. Franklin, I've warned Ken Rendell, I've warned Sotheby's. They went ahead with the sale. You bought it using the funds from the national organization that I was head of, the Utah organization. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so Daniel investigated, talked to the others, and immediately demanded their money back from Sotheby's. And Sotheby's paid their money back, gave them their money back. Simon Worrell wrote the book, told me later that he was trying to visit, or somehow with Axelrod down there in Nevada, to ask about this for his book, and that the mail had just arrived. He was pretty sure it was coming back that day from Sotheby's, but you'll have to read that in his book. But I think that's what he told me at the time. And also in his book, he tells the story of the Hoffman bombings and all of that kind of stuff in the front. And he has in there that I missed a bomb by 10 minutes, And when he came out here, we did a radio show together. And at the time, when his book came out, and I said, Simon, I wasn't even in Salt Lake that day. And so he inscribed my copy of the book to Brent. I hope I got some of this right, Simon. It was cute anyway. He's a nice guy. He was an Englishman, and he wrote that. He's written some other thing. But obviously that's the basic story on it. And it's been written up, it's been published, and like I say, he did a book on it too. So, and then Maine Antiques Digest. So it was one time where I was able to warn somebody, even though they went ahead with the sale, they had to return the money later. And so that was one Hoffman fake that didn't quite make it, you know.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Brent Ashworth. Our next conversation with Brent will be our last, and we'll talk about his apology to Mark's ex-wife, Dory. It's a conversation you won't want to miss, but it's only going to be available to newsletter subscribers. So sign up to gospeltangents.com/newsletter, and I'll send you a free link, a secret link, to the final episode of our conversation with Mark. And this is some of the things we're going to cover.
It took me about 3 years. I always thought Mark was using his wife, okay, that she was in on some of this because she was so near to it. And I was kind of taking it out mentally on his wife, on Dory, for those years. Finally, it dawned on me, it takes me a little while, but finally it dawned on me that she was just as much in the dark as the rest of us,
right.
Okay, even though she's right next to him. And that I'd been kind of blaming her, or I shouldn't have blamed her for any part in it. And I felt guilty, and I thought, you know, I need to go apologize to Dory.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, sign up at patreon.com/gospeltangents, and for $5 a month, you can hear the entire interview without any interruptions. If you'd like to see the whole video, that's just $8 a month, and you can sign up either at youtube.com/gospeltangents or on our website at gospeltangents.com and click the yellow subscribe button, or you can go to patreon.com/gospeltangents, and I'll just need to make sure that we're Facebook friends, and I'll add you to our insiders group, and you can see the entire interview uncut. If you'd like to get PDF transcripts of our interviews, those are just $10 a month. And for just $15 a month, I will send you paperback versions of our transcripts as soon as they come out. Or, of course, you can buy them on Amazon as well. Go to Amazon.com and do a search for Gospel Tangents Interview, and you can see all of our transcripts there. Don't forget to sign up for our updates at Facebook.com/gospeltangents. Of course, you can follow us at Gospel Tangents on Twitter. To hear our interviews updated to your podcast player, go to tinyurl.com/gospeltangents, and make sure you give us a 5-star review. And of course, you should show your support for Gospel Tangents with one of these cool t-shirts, like this green one, or light blue, sport gray, royal blue, purple, of course black, beautiful gold, and of course Utah red. I probably left out some colors, but if you want to see more, go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get one of these. So once again, thanks for listening. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some more of our great videos. Thanks again.